On the afternoon of March 11, 2011, two tectonic plates, 43 miles off the coast of Japan's northern mainland, collided. The sudden and dramatic shift resulted in an earthquake, measuring 9.0 on the Richter scale, the fourth largest ever recorded. Shiyuki Komura was at her home in the coastal city of Hisanohama when the earthquake struck.
I went out of my house and found all the glasses of my next door broken.
Komura met us at the port in Hisanohama to share her story of the unprecedented event that soon followed after the quake.
My husband rushed to outside to watch the sea and saw tsunami like black wall was coming toward him. He ran back to our house and shouted, "Go upstairs right now. Tsunami is coming."
The first wall of water from the tsunami slammed into many towns along Japan's eastern coast, measuring well over 30 feet at their peak. The blue water of the Pacific soon became black as wave after wave swept through the streets, throwing cars, unhinging houses, and claiming lives, dragging all caught up in it back to sea. When the survivors woke the next morning, they spent little time picking up the pieces of their lives before leaving their homes behind, sometimes for good. 6 years later, some have moved back, others have made new lives in other towns, and many more are still conflicted about their future.
I like the sea and I like Hisanohama, but I'm afraid.
Tens of thousands of people fled for higher ground and found shelter in the days that followed the earthquake and the tsunami. But with no electricity, television, or radio, and no cell phones or internet, people had no idea that another disaster was brewing along the coast of Fukushima. TEPCO's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant sat on the coastline, pounded by the tsunami. The plant was overwhelmed with water and lost all power. A nuclear meltdown was underway in 3 of the 6 reactors. For the next 3 days, massive radioactive clouds were released and spread over northern Japan and out into the ocean. Towns were emptied within the 20-mile no-go zone, and some may never be reopened because of the fallout. According to the Japanese government, over 470,000 people were forced to leave their home from any one of the 3 elements of the triple disaster. Many sought refuge immediately after the disaster, in schools, gymnasiums, and family houses. Eventually, many of those evacuees moved to temporary housing, hastily constructed by the government. 35,000 people remain in temporary housing in 2017, 6 years after the disaster. 3 members of the Shiga family live in a small temporary home in Iwaki City, with 1 room for sleeping, 1 bathroom, and a small kitchen, about 20 miles from their home in Naraha.
We miss Naraha. We prefer it there because our friends are there. When we came to temporary housing, we were criticized by the people in this neighborhood who lived outside of temporary housing. There were rumors about us, probably about radiation.
As towns are cleaned and reopened, temporary housing units across Japan are closing, leaving many of these evacuees with uncertainty in their future.
It is not just the radiation we are afraid of. It is our livelihood. The population is very, very small. We need to have shops. We need to have hospitals. But whether it is possible to move back or not, the population needs to be rebuilt to what it was before.
Across Japan, older residents are returning to their homes. They are not concerned about the effects of radiation because they don't expect to live long enough to see them. But younger families, especially those with children, are creating new lives in different cities and towns.
I was born and grew up in Naraha, so I want to move back, but I have 3 daughters and they go to the schools in Iwaki, and they have a lot of friends there. They used to come to kindergarten here before the earthquake. They have their own friends here, but they are split, so they don't offer their friendship to the old friends in Naraha. So it is hard for me to come back to Naraha with my daughters. So I decided to live in Iwaki.
Matsumoto Ryoshi teaches at the brand new Naraha Elementary and Junior High School. Naraha was the first evacuated town declared safe to live in 2 years ago, after soil was dug up and radiation-tainted structures were torn down. But only 20% of the original population has moved back.
There are tons of radioactive soils right near our houses. Those still look very strange to us. I am an adult, but still think this is really dangerous.
Many evacuees have created lives in other towns. They have new jobs, and their kids are settled in new schools. But town leaders in Naraha, hope this brand new school will convince families to move back home, bringing life and a future to these towns ravaged by the triple disaster of 3/11.